The Colorado wind howled like it was warning something. In Elkridge, a mountain town barely holding on to its place on the map, the snow came down thick and hard. It didn't fall, it buried. The world was colorless, quiet, and cruel. Caleb Rowan drove that road the way only a man who had nothing left would. One hand on the wheel, the other on the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw like a lightning bolt carved in flesh. He didn't flinch when the truck skidded a little. He didn't blink when the heater coughed its last breath. The storm outside was just another version of the war he'd left behind. He hadn't planned to be out this far, not tonight. But the silence of his cabin had gotten too loud. It always did this time of year. The date, the ghosts. So he drove into the cold, hoping to outrun what memory refused to forget. The trees pressed in close, black bones against white sky. His headlights cut through the storm like a bayonet, catching nothing but snow and shadow. And then something blinked, just off the right shoulder, a glint, then gone. Caleb tapped the brakes. His tires crunched down into something more than snow. Ice! He killed the engine and let the silence settle, the kind of silence that hummed behind your teeth. He grabbed the flashlight from the glove box and stepped into the wind. The air hit him like a slap. Sharp. Punishing. His boots sank deep into the snow as he walked toward the flicker he'd seen. The beam of his flashlight swept left, right, and then stopped. There it was. An old Chevy pickup, abandoned and half-eaten by rust. One door hung crooked, windshield shattered, snow crusted along every edge. And beside it, slumped against the frame, was something that shouldn't be alive. A dog. German shepherd. Big frame, but wasted down to bone. Its fur was patchy, frozen in places, ribs visible even in the flicker of light. Blood had dried around its paws, and a crude wire collar was digging deep into its neck. The chain held it tight to the frame, as if someone wanted it here to die, slow, cold, and alone. Caleb crouched. "Hey," he said, voice low, calm. "It's okay." The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared, eyes amber and wild, defiant, a soldier's eyes. He reached into his coat and pulled out his old combat knife, the same one he'd used in sandstorms a world away. The chain was tangled, rusted solid. "I'm getting you out," Caleb muttered, more to himself than to the dog. The knife hit metal. The dog tensed. "Easy," Caleb whispered. "Not here to hurt you." Each stroke of the blade made his fingers numb. The chain resisted, frozen into the frame. The dog shifted once, ears twitching. Caleb saw the wire had cut all the way through the leather of the makeshift collar. Someone had wrapped fencing wire into it, twisted and cruel. Finally, the blade caught the right spot. A snap. The chain broke free. The dog didn't move at first. Then its legs buckled and it collapsed forward. Caleb caught the weight, shocked at how light it was. Jesus. It didn't resist as he wrapped his scarf around its neck, creating a barrier between skin and steel. The dog pressed its nose briefly into Caleb's jacket. Not affection, not yet, but trust, just enough. "You're coming with me," Caleb said, standing up with the dog in his arms. "Let's get you warm." Snow whipped sideways across the clearing as he made it back to the truck. He opened the door and set the shepherd on the passenger seat, covering it with his coat. The dog's breath was shallow, eyes barely open, but alive. Caleb circled to the driver's side and stopped. Lights, far back, in the trees, not headlights on the road. Lower, moving slow. Someone was watching. His breath clouded in the air. The old instincts flared, combat sharpness, awareness prickling up his spine. The lights blinked once, then vanished. He didn't wait. Caleb climbed in, turned the key, and backed out fast. The tires spun, caught, and pushed forward. The road twisted like a blade through the pines. but he drove it blind. He didn't look back. Next to him, the dog lay quiet, but Caleb could feel its heartbeat under the jacket, fast and fighting. "You're safe now," he said, not knowing if it was true. The road blurred. Snow thickened. Behind them, somewhere in the woods, someone had just lost their secret. And maybe their weapon. Because Caleb Rowan wasn't the kind of man who stumbled on things and walked away. Not anymore. Not when something this broken was still fighting to live. The shepherd gave a weak exhale. A sound that wasn't pain. Not anymore. Just relief. Caleb glanced sideways. "We'll figure this out," he said, and the dog, with the last of its strength, thumped its tail once against the seat. A miracle didn't always look like light from the sky. Sometimes it looked like a man who stopped. And a dog who didn't die. The lights inside Elkridge Veterinary Clinic were a soft amber, a gentle contrast to the blizzard still raging outside. Caleb pushed through the door, the bell chiming sharp and hollow, his arms wrapped tight around the limp body of the dog. Snow dusted his shoulders. His breath fogged the glass. Behind the front desk, Dr. Dylan McKay looked up from a worn clipboard and froze. "Holy hell," he muttered, already moving. "Get him on the table." Caleb didn't waste time. He stepped into the exam room and gently laid the dog onto the metal surface. The dog's eyes flickered open briefly, dazed and unfocused, before sliding shut again. His breathing was shallow. His paws twitched once, as if still fighting something in a dream. Dr. McKay pulled on gloves, grabbing gauze and saline. He moved with the steady, controlled precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. But even he was rattled. "What the hell happened?" he asked. "Found him chained to an old truck," Caleb said. "Out, near North Ridge. Someone left him to die." McKay cursed under his breath. "Sick bastards." He began working, checking vitals, flushing wounds, clipping away ice-caked fur around the neck. When he got to the collar, his expression darkened. This wasn't just neglect. This was deliberate. Look at this. The wire had been twisted so tight into the makeshift collar that it had cut through layers of fur and into the skin. Dried blood crusted around the wound, the infection already trying to take hold. Caleb watched silently, his fists clenched at his sides. "He's a fighter," McKay added. "Most dogs wouldn't have made it through the night in that condition." The dog stirred then. A low, guttural growl hummed in his chest. Not aggressive, just instinct. His eyes opened, locked on McKay's hands. Caleb stepped closer, laying a hand gently on the dog's shoulder. "Easy, Ranger." It came out before he thought about it. The name just fit. The dog's ears flicked. Recognition, maybe. Or maybe just the calm in Caleb's voice. McKay arched an eyebrow. "Ranger?" Caleb nodded once. "That's his name." The vet kept working. "Well, Ranger's a damn miracle. Dehydrated, bruised, but nothing's broken. I'll keep him overnight, run fluids, antibiotics, see how he responds." As McKay moved to check under the dog's fur near the chest, something caught his eye. He leaned closer, squinting. "Wait a second." He wiped the area clean, revealing faded ink just beneath the skin near the shoulder blade. A tattoo. Not decorative, functional. "What is that?" Caleb asked. "Military ID tag," McKay muttered. "Canine unit. I've seen them before, back when I did contract work with the National Guard. Each one's tied to a specific handler, unit, and program." He adjusted his glasses and read it aloud. "SRX 242. Caleb stepped closer, his gut twisting. "Does that prefix mean anything to you?" McKay shook his head slowly. "No, and that's the weird part. Standard military units start with MP or K9D. This isn't one I recognize. Could be private sector or black ops." Before either of them could say more, the clinic door chimed again. Footsteps, a breeze of cold air, and then a voice. "Doc, your backlot lights are flickering again." A woman stepped into view, early 30s, tall, sharp-featured, auburn hair tucked under a beanie. Her uniform jacket was open, revealing a grey thermal and the glint of a badge clipped at her hip. "Maya?" McKay called, relief in his tone. "Come here a sec." Maya Reed, deputy with the Elkridge PD, stepped into the room and stopped short at the sight of the dog. "Oh my God, what happened to him?" Caleb explained quickly. She moved closer, eyes narrowing as she looked at the tattoo. "SRX 214, she murmured. "That's not in our local database, but the format looks federal." "You think this could be classified?" McKay asked. "Possibly," she replied, already pulling her phone out. "I can check with a friend over at the State Fusion Center. Might take a day or two." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You think someone left him out there on purpose? To die?" Maya hesitated. "If he was tied to something sensitive, and they needed to bury it quietly. Maybe. That happens more than people think. Dogs like this don't just disappear. They're retired, reassigned, not dumped in the snow." Ranger stirred again. His ears twitched, his nose twitched, and then he growled. Not at McKay, not at Maya, at the radio. A small unit on the counter had been playing soft classic rock, but as the signal shifted, it landed on static for a moment. Then a voice crackled through. A man's voice, tinny, distorted. A recording. "Unit 3, hold perimeter until drop confirmed. SRX active." Ranger stood. Or tried to. He pushed up with shaky legs, growling, ears pinned, tail low but ready. His body went rigid, eyes focused on the speaker like it was a threat. Or a memory. Caleb reached out but didn't touch him. Ranger's growl shifted. Not aggression. Recognition. Maya moved toward the radio and lowered the volume. Ranger relaxed. Slowly. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. McKay looked between them. "That wasn't coincidence." "No," Caleb said. "It wasn't." Maya glanced at him, her voice lower now. "You just walked into something, Rowan. Something deep. And judging by that reaction, he didn't escape." Caleb nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Ranger. He survived. Ranger finally lay down again, breath slowing, but his eyes stayed open, watching, guarding. And in that moment, Caleb realized something cold and hard. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a recovery, and someone out there might want their asset back. The storm had quieted by morning, leaving Elkridge blanketed under a crust of hardened snow that crackled beneath every step. Caleb Rowan stood on his porch, a mug of black coffee steaming in his gloved hands. The horizon was a blinding white. Trees bent low with ice. The air bit his skin, but it wasn't the cold that made him uneasy. It was Ranger. The dog paced the porch, ears flicking, nose to the wind. Alert. Restless. Something in him hadn't settled since the clinic. Caleb had seen that kind of tension before, on patrol just before things went sideways. Now it was stitched into Ranger's every movement. "What is it, boy?" Caleb asked quietly. Ranger let out a soft whine and walked to the edge of the porch, looking back once before bounding down into the snow. He didn't bark, didn't hesitate, just moved, deliberate and focused. Caleb didn't need a second signal. He threw on his coat, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and followed. Ranger cut across the back property line, through a break in the trees, and toward the ridge. Snow came up to his belly, but he powered forward. His breath left a trail in the air like smoke from an engine running hot. Caleb kept pace, boots crunching, the wind scraping his ears raw. They moved for half a mile before Caleb recognized the clearing. The rusted truck still sat half-buried where he'd found Ranger 2 nights ago. The snow had covered most of the bloodstains, but the outline of suffering lingered. Caleb slowed, scanning the woods. Still. Too still. Ranger didn't stop. He circled the truck once, then began to dig. "What are you looking for?" Caleb muttered. The shepherd's paws moved fast, flinging snow behind him in heavy sprays. Something beneath the truck. Not bone, not scent. It was deeper. Caleb stepped closer, crouched beside him, and started to help. The snow was packed tight, unnaturally so. Flattened, deliberately. That sent a shiver up his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. After 5 minutes, Ranger's paw hit metal. A dull thud. They cleared more snow until a round steel hatch emerged, crusted in rust, almost indistinguishable from the truck frame. It had no markings, just a latch and hinge. "What the hell is this?" Caleb pulled his knife from his belt and scraped away the last of the ice. His fingers were going numb, but adrenaline made him ignore it. He wedged the blade into the latch, twisted, and with a brittle crack, it popped loose. The hatch groaned open. A breath of stale air escaped, the kind that had been trapped for years. Old oil, dust, metal, and something else. Money, death, maybe both. Ranger growled low, but stayed close. Caleb shined his flashlight down. A small chamber, 8 feet deep. A steel ladder led into the dark. The beam cut across metal crates, stacked neatly in rows against the wall. No dust, no collapse. This wasn't junk. This was organized, protected. He hesitated, then whispered, "Stay." Ranger didn't move, just sat, ears forward, eyes sharp. Caleb climbed down. The chamber was cold but dry. The floor was a mix of packed dirt and poured concrete. His boots echoed with each step. The crates were military style, but not regulation. He wiped frost from one and read the label. RMR Logistics Co. Never heard of it. He pried the lid off the nearest crate. Inside, assault rifles, dozens, wrapped in oiled cloth, pristine. Beneath them, ammunition packed in rows, clean, sealed, ready for war. He moved to the next crate, opened it. Stacks of cash, rubber-banded, mixed currencies, dollars, euros, bills crisp and unmarked. Caleb stepped back, breath fogging. "This is a damn supply point." He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over Maya Reed's number. This was beyond local law. This was federal and dangerous. Then he heard it. Above, a branch snapping. Soft, deliberate. He clicked off his flashlight instantly. Darkness swallowed the chamber. He stood frozen, every muscle coiled. Ranger barked, one sharp, commanding sound. Caleb cursed under his breath and moved for the ladder. He climbed fast but quiet, rifle swinging on, his back. As he reached the surface, he kept low, peeking over the hatch rim. Nothing moved. The forest held its breath. Then, a flicker, a shape between the trees, just a silhouette. But watching. Caleb's hand found his rifle. He didn't raise it. Not yet. He scanned for more movement. There was nothing. No footsteps. No crunch of snow, but someone had been there. Ranger stood rigid beside him, body trembling with tension, not fear, readiness. "Good boy," Caleb whispered. "You knew." The figure disappeared into the trees, silent, trained. Caleb waited another full minute before standing and shutting the hatch. He brushed snow over it, burying it like a grave. Only then did he exhale. "Someone's guarding this," he said quietly. Ranger looked up at him, eyes locked, focused, like a soldier waiting for orders. Caleb didn't need more proof. This wasn't an accident. Ranger hadn't been dumped, he'd been left behind, to guard something, or to be erased with it. Either way, that plan had just failed. And somewhere, someone knew it. Night came in hard and fast. The wind that had been a nuisance all day turned into something with teeth. Snow hit the cabin windows like thrown gravel. Inside, the stove glowed low, and the small rooms smelled of coffee and boiled broth. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, rubbing his hands for heat. Ranger at his feet, chest heaving slow and steady. For a half hour, they were a pocket of ordinary life. Caleb let himself believe, for a thin, foolish moment, that ordinary could last. Then the back door exploded inward with a sound like wood breaking in two. Shards flew into the room. Snow puffed inside in a white cloud. 3 shadows moved through it, fast and practiced. They were not drunk kids. They moved with a discipline that had nothing to do with luck. Caleb's first thought was fists and old training. His second thought was to reach for the rifle propped behind the chair. The door slammed against the wall, and a boot hit the floor with a heavy, deliberate step. A man rushed in, face wrapped in a balaclava, hands already searching for light. Another shoved past him, bigger, carrying something long and hard. The third stayed near the threshold, checking the darkness beyond the porch. Adrenaline filled Caleb like cold water. Years of muscle memory came back in a blink. He moved for the gun with his right hand while his left found Ranger's collar and yanked. Ranger reacted in a way that made the room tilt and focus. He launched, a solid, sudden thing, teeth and fury. The first intruder turned to face him, and for a second the room narrowed to teeth and a black sleeve. Ranger caught an arm, slammed him sideways, and the masked man went down with a ragged cry. "Stay down," Caleb said, voice flat. He felt the old steadiness come back, the parts of himself that knew how to aim, how to count scars like a map. He raised the rifle slowly. The other 2 men lunged at the stove, trying to flank him. One made it across the table and swung a heavy crowbar. Caleb ducked and fired once. The bullet caught the floor where the man had stood, and splinters flew. The man cursed and stumbled, not badly hurt. He rolled, found his feet, and grabbed for the door. Ranger was already at him. The dog hammered into the man's thigh, teeth clamping, making him scream. Blood spattered the snow that had been dragged inside. The masked man reached for a knife and slashed, a wild glint. Ranger barked, a sound that seemed to come from the center of his chest. He twisted, and when he did, the blade caught his side. The dog yelped, a thin human sound, and bit down harder. The intruder dropped the knife and tried to pull away. Ranger held on. Caleb saw the dog's side bloom red. It happened fast enough that he barely registered panic. He moved like a machine, shoulder forward, hands operating with the precision of someone who had made the field into instruction. He drove between the men, shoved one into the wall, and slammed the rifle butt into another's collarbone. He hit with the force of someone used to striking decisive blows. The man crumpled, mask torn, eyes wide. The third man bolted. Snow tore at him as he crashed through the doorway and disappeared into the night. Caleb could hear boots crunch through the drifts, and then silence, the howl of wind swallowing all sound. Ranger sagged back on his haunches, gasping. His flank was wet and dark. Caleb dropped to his knees the way you drop when you have to catch something that nearly falls forever. He shoved the dog between his arms and felt the heat of his breath. Ranger didn't whine. He blinked and tried to sit. His eyes were bright and clear, the amber that had stared at Caleb in that first clearing. He wagged his tail once, a small, defiant thump. Caleb's hands shook as he ripped at a sleeve to bind the wound. Blood soaked the cloth. He muttered, counting heartbeats, breathing in and out until the shaking steadied. Ranger's chest rose slow. He was alive. When the bigger man on the floor moved, coughing, he had lost his mask. The thing lay on the floor in a puddle of shadow and steam. Caleb kicked it aside with his boot. The face beneath was a middle-aged man with a scar down one cheek, and eyes that had the practiced fear of someone who'd been caught with his hand in a safe. Caleb felt a lurch of something that was not relief. It was recognition of how close the night had come to being final. The man tried to speak. words scraping out in a hiss. His breath was shallow. "You picked the wrong house," Caleb said. The man coughed blood onto the floor, and then, as if he couldn't help it, his hand went to the inside of the mask. He pulled free a band of cloth with a logo stitched there. It was small, like the quiet of a name you never wanted. A rearing horse, black on white, with the words Stallion Freight stitched beneath it. A transport company. A business card. A brand. Caleb felt the world tilt for a second. Stallion Freight was not a small operation. Frank Keller ran that company. Frank Keller, the man who had helped fund the new library, the man who supported the mayor, the smiling portrait in the local paper, a businessman with a handshake and a tie, the sort of man who gave scholarships and then looked away from how the trucks left the yard at night. The man on the floor laughed, a small, ugly sound. "You can tie brands to masks all you want." He spat. "You can pin the whole damn county with a name and a ribbon. Still don't mean a thing. He told us to watch the dog. You stabbed the plan." Caleb forced himself to breathe. He had to keep his head. He had to keep the dog breathing. He rose and searched the intruder quickly for anything else. Wallet, phone, company ID. Frank Keller's name did not have to be on a card for it to be him. One thing was enough, smaller and crueler than a printed letter. The mask itself was a statement. The man tried to move, and Caleb put a boot on his chest. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The man's eyes slitted, as if the question meant something different than survival. "You think this is the first time we moved things for him?" The man whispered. "You think we'd leave the signature out in the cold if we wanted to hide it?" Caleb stared at him. The man coughed again, and a scrap of paper fluttered from his pocket. Caleb picked it up, a hastily scrawled number and a name. The pen had written fast and sloppy, as if it had been used in breathless moments between loading and leaving. The disguise gave them away in a way their weapons did not. Someone with money had sent someone with muscle, someone who wore suits in daylight and masks at night. Someone with a reputation to lose had hired men willing to break bones for small sums. Caleb looked at Ranger, who had closed his eyes for a second, then opened them and fixed his gaze on the wounded man as if cataloguing what he had done. The dog's chest rose and fell. He had saved a life, and in doing so, he had crossed an invisible line no one in Elkridge had the courage to cross out loud. Caleb turned to the knocked-down man and said, "You tell the name, and I'll make sure people who matter hear it." The man's laugh was bitterer now. "You'll end up with crumbs and a story. Keller's got friends. He buys silence like he buys gravel for his drives. He'll move it under new names. That is the way of it." Caleb's fingers tightened. He thought of a town that called itself good and of a dog left to die because the people above wanted ease and profit. He thought of the hatch and the crates beneath the truck. He thought of the logo on the mask like a brand seared into something soft. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering tracks, washing away footprints. Inside, the quiet felt like a debt. Caleb looked down at Ranger and swallowed. The dog licked his hand, a rough, warm patch against the cold. "You did good," Caleb said. "You saved me." Ranger made a small sound, not a bark, not a whimper. It sounded like an answer. They would need help, and they would need names. Frank Keller's logo on a mask was a beginning, not an end. It was the first thread Caleb could pull. But for now the night held its breath, and a man and his dog sat in a cabin that had been almost taken from them, listening to the storm as if it might tell them where to start. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside Caleb's cabin dipped in silver. Ice clung to the branches like glass threads, and snowbanks rose against fences like sleeping giants. The kind of quiet that followed gunfire and fear. But inside, the tension hadn't melted. Ranger lay curled by the wood stove, one paw bandaged, his breathing soft but steady. Caleb sat nearby, cleaning the rifle again out of habit more than need. He'd barely slept, mind circling the same questions over and over. Stallion freight. Keller. Why a dog like Ranger was chained out there like bait, and why someone with real money was willing to spill blood to keep it buried. Then came the knock. 3 quick taps, awkward and light. Caleb moved to the door slowly, cautious. He looked through the frosted pane. A kid. Elliot? The boy lived 2 cabins down with his mother. Quiet, artistic, no more than 11, and always carrying that sketch pad like it was armor. Caleb opened the door. Cold rushed in. "Hey," the boy said, cheeks flushed from running through the cold. I need to talk to you." Caleb scanned the tree line. No car, no one else. He stepped aside. "Come in, you all right?" Elliot nodded, boots crunching on the entry rug. He held the sketchpad tight to his chest, eyes wide behind fogged glasses. "I saw something," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Last night, down at the docks." Caleb closed the door, heart already picking up pace. Ranger stirred, ears perked. Elliot took a deep breath and sat at the table. "I snuck out. I know I'm not supposed to, but sometimes I go to the water, just to draw." He opened his sketch pad. The first page showed the river dock, rough but detailed. A long truck with floodlights, men lifting crates. In the center, a man standing near a barge, tall, angular face, dark coat. And stitched onto the front of the truck's cab, the same rearing horse logo. Stallion Freight. Elliot flipped the page. A license plate. Perfectly copied. And under it, scrawled in pencil, 10:30 p.m., big shipment. No more screw-ups. Caleb sat down slowly, his stomach turning to stone. "Did you hear that? Someone say it?" The boy nodded. It was the man in the long coat. I think it was Mr. Keller. He was talking to 2 guys who looked like the ones on the posters at the sheriff's office. The big guys. One of them had a tattoo like a skull with wires in it. I tried to draw that too. He flipped again. Another sketch. Crude, but unmistakable. The same tattoo Caleb had seen on the arm of the man. Ranger took down in the cabin. It clicked like thunder in his head. This wasn't just cargo. It was infrastructure. Illegal shipments disguised as routine freight. And the boy had sketched it with the detail of someone who saw what the town refused to. Caleb leaned forward. "You can't tell anyone else about this. Not yet. Not even your mom." Elliot hesitated. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Caleb said. "You just might have saved a lot of people." Ranger walked over and nudged the boy's leg gently, tail sweeping the floor once. Elliot smiled for the first time. "He remembers me. I drew him too, you know." Caleb stood. "I need to make a call. Stay here a minute." He stepped onto the porch and dialed. Maya answered on the second ring. "Rowan? I've got something. A witness." He explained quickly. The sketch, the license plate, the time. He could hear her breathing hard on the other end, gears turning. "Caleb, this is big. I mean, federal big." "You said you had a friend in state intelligence. Can they pull that license plate?" "I'll try, but if we move too fast, we spook him. Keller's got insulation, shell companies, offshore routing. If this is what I think it is, we're looking at a weapons funnel dressed as freight. That barge could be international." "Then we wait." "No," Maya said. "You do, I'll dig." Caleb hung up and went back inside. Elliot was showing Ranger another drawing, this one of the mountain range at sunset. The dog sat beside him like a sentry, tail thumping every few seconds. "You're good at this," Caleb said. "Art's the only thing I'm good at." Elliot shrugged. Caleb knelt next to him. "Kid, what you did here, that's courage. That's more than most grown men." Elliot smiled, but it was smaller now. When Caleb walked him home, he didn't speak. Neither did Elliot. But when they reached the porch light, the boy looked up. "They were mad, Mr. Rowan. When I left, I think they saw me." Caleb froze. "You sure?" "I heard yelling, and then an engine started real fast. I ran." Back at the cabin, Ranger stood by the window, watching the dark like it might twitch. Caleb looked down at his bandaged side, the scar red but healing. "You were bait," he said under his breath. "But not anymore." Ranger turned his head, amber eyes glowing in the dim stove light. Caleb stared back. No more waiting. No more reacting. It was time to pull the mask off Keller's empire, one thread at a time. And the first pull came from a kid with a pencil and a dog who refused to forget what he'd been trained to guard. The lake looked dead under the moonlight. Ice stretched across its surface like a frozen scar, unbroken except for the faint cracks near the dock's edge. Fog rolled in low, brushing against the pylons. The old boathouse stood dark and empty. Beyond it, the cargo lights glowed like watchful eyes. Caleb lay prone behind a mound of snow, his rifle slung across his chest, camera in hand. Beside him, Maya adjusted the telephoto lens on her scope, breath shallow against the chill. Ranger crouched low between them, alert and still. "There," Maya whispered. "That's him." Through the lens, Caleb spotted the tall figure near the loading ramp. Even in the dark, even through the fog, the posture was unmistakable. Frank Keller, suit under a long coat, hands in gloves, watching like a man who owned the night. Behind him, two men offloaded crates from the back of a stallion freight truck. Each box was heavy, handled with care. One slipped open. Beneath the tarp, Caleb caught the glint of weapon metal. Black market rifles, clean, stamped. "Got it," Maya said, snapping frame after frame with the infrared camera. On the edge of the dock, a flat barge waited, engine silent. Another man paced beside it, clipboard in hand, barking low instructions. It wasn't local. This was coordinated. "This isn't some side hustle," Caleb murmured. "This is a damn operation." Maya nodded. "And Keller's not just a middleman. He's the one giving the orders." Ranger let out a low growl, soft, but enough to stiffen both of them. "What is it?" Maya asked. The shepherd stared toward the boathouse. A shadow moved, then another. "Flank team," Caleb said. "They're securing the area. We're not the only ones watching tonight." The wind shifted. Cold swept across the lake, clearing the fog for a moment. "Camera's full," Maya whispered. "We've got enough to blow this wide open." Caleb reached for the satellite uplink in his pack, ready to transmit the evidence. That's when he heard it. A crunch behind them. Too soft for deer, too heavy for wind. He turned. A man emerged from the trees, all black, rifle raised. Another followed behind him, circling. "They're on us!" A shot cracked through the silence. The first bullet missed Caleb by inches, smacking into the snowpack. He dropped and rolled, grabbing his rifle. "Move!" he barked. Maya dove to the side, dragging the camera with her. Another shot split the night. And then came the roar. Ranger exploded forward, a blur of fur and teeth. He lunged at the shooter just as the man turned his aim. The gun fired. A single shot. The noise rang like thunder across the ice. Ranger's body twisted midair, slammed into the man's chest, driving him backward. They both hit the snow, a mess of limbs and snarls. "Ranger!" Caleb's scream cut through the chaos. He rushed forward, just as the second gunman opened fire. Caleb dropped to a knee, squeezed the trigger. One clean shot. The attacker spun, rifle flying from his hands. He fell silent. Maya sprinted to Ranger's side. The dog was down, side bleeding, breath fast and shallow. "No, no, no," she murmured, pressing her hand against the wound. "You hold on. Do you hear me?" Caleb dropped beside them, voice shaking. "He saved me. He saw it before I did. Blood soaked the snow around them. Caleb wrapped his jacket under Ranger's body, lifting gently. He's still breathing, Maya said. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing. Her call to the fusion center had worked. Backup was coming, but so was the storm. Across the dock, Keller turned at the sound of gunfire. He barked a command and disappeared into the barge. "Go!" Caleb shouted. "Take the footage, don't let it vanish." "I'm not leaving him," Maya snapped. "I've got Ranger, you get Keller." Maya hesitated. One look at Caleb's face, and she nodded. She bolted across the shoreline, ducking behind crates, making for the barge as it pulled from the dock. Ranger whimpered. Caleb whispered softly, holding him tighter. "You did good, soldier. You did more than anyone asked." The shepherd blinked, trying to focus. His tail flicked once. Above them, the stars blinked through the cloud cover. Sirens came closer. Caleb pressed his forehead against Ranger's. "You're going to make it. You hear me?" And somewhere behind the pain, behind the blood and breath, Ranger exhaled and lived. The early morning sky over Elkridge was a haze of blue and ash. Smoke still lingered from the barge's abandoned engine, and ice crunched beneath the boots of the federal task force as they moved across the dock. Sirens had faded. The shooting had stopped. But the tension hadn't. Maya stood over Frank Keller, now cuffed and kneeling in the snow, face bloodied from the scuffle, lips curled in quiet defiance. "You're done," she said coldly. Keller looked up, face streaked with melted frost and pride. "You don't understand the size of this," he sneered. "You think taking down one man fixes anything?" "No," Maya replied. "But it's a damn good start." She stepped back as the agents hoisted him up, dragging him towards the SUV that waited at the edge of the road. Flashes from the news cameras lit the scene like lightning. The press had arrived, and for once, the light wasn't staged. Caleb watched from a distance, standing outside the mobile medical unit. His jacket was soaked, Ranger's blood dried in patches along the sleeves. Inside the van, the vet team worked in a blur. Tubes, heat blankets, a team flown in from Denver because the local clinic wasn't equipped for bullet wounds like this. "Still no update?" Maya asked, walking over. Caleb shook his head, jaw locked tight. "They took him into surgery an hour ago. Said it hit the side, missed the lung, but it's close." "He's a fighter," Maya said gently. "Too much so." She didn't push further, just stood beside him as the wind picked up again. Behind them, the agents loaded the last of the confiscated crates into armored trucks. Ammunition, rifles, fake bills, offshore manifests, enough to send a dozen men away for life. But the man who mattered most was already in custody, still. Maya didn't look, relieved. "What is it?" Caleb asked. She hesitated. Then, someone in the department tipped him off. Caleb blinked. "You sure?" "We intercepted a radio chatter thread. Local code, not encrypted. Someone warned Keller that someone was watching the docks. Could have been a lucky guess. Or it could have been someone in uniform." That settled like lead in Caleb's gut. Maya pulled her phone, scrolling. "I pulled records. Traffic cam footage showed a sheriff's cruiser parked near the boathouse yesterday morning. No assignment, no log. Who was driving it? That's the thing. It was registered under Captain Grady Simmons." Caleb frowned. "That guy's been with the department since the Stone Age." "Exactly. Loyal to a fault. Loyal to Keller, maybe." They were still standing there when a rusted green pickup pulled up the hill. It was Grady. He got out slow. Not in fear, in resignation. The man looked older than he had the week before, skin sagging, eyes dark under his cap. "I heard Keller went down," he said, voice low. "You got him?" Maya's hand hovered near her sidearm. "You coming to congratulate me?" "No." Grady looked straight at Caleb. "I'm here to give you something." From the glove box, he pulled out a thick black hard drive, wrapped in a cloth and sealed in a Ziploc. "Keller had me for years," he said. "I kept my head down, kept my pension clean. But this—" He handed it over. "What is it?" Caleb asked. "Everything," Grady said bitterly. "Surveillance records, shipping logs, contracts, the names that never made the ledgers." Maya stared at him. "Why now?" Grady's voice cracked. "Because I saw what that dog did for you. I saw him bleeding out and still fighting, and I realized I'd spent 20 years backing men who never bled for anyone but themselves." Maya took the drive, nodded. "You'll have to testify." "I know," he said. Then he looked at Caleb. "Tell that dog, if he pulls through, tell him thanks." Grady turned and walked away, his figure shrinking into the fog like a ghost surrendering its secrets. Back inside the medical van, the vet stepped out finally, her gloves red, her eyes tired. Caleb walked over fast. "How is he?" "He made it," she said, voice cracking just enough to carry weight. "Lost a lot of blood, but the bullet missed his organs. He's sleeping, stable." Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Behind him, Maya smiled. "You hear that?" she said. Ranger, still groggy, thumped his tail once against the cot. The town of Elkridge would remember a lot of things about that week, but most of all it would remember the sound of a dog's tail hitting metal, like a war drum announcing something finally worth believing in. The snow had melted. What was once a town buried in silence and frost now breathed again under the soft sun of early spring. Elkridge, Colorado, looked like a place that had never known shadows, the kind of lie small towns tell themselves when the hard part is over. On Main Street, tucked between the rebuilt hardware store and the faded barber shop, a new wooden sign hung above a small cafe. Ranger's Rest. Inside, the smell of roasted coffee beans mixed with pine and old books. The walls were lined with photographs. Local veterans, some smiling, some solemn, all framed in reclaimed barnwood. A corner bookshelf held journals, letters, folded flags. No glitz, just memory. Earned and quiet. Caleb Rowan stood behind the counter, wiping down mugs with a towel older than the espresso machine. He moved slower these days, not from age but from choosing peace, the kind that follows when you've survived something you weren't sure you would. Outside, on the porch, Ranger lay with his head between his paws. The scar on his flank had healed into a faint line beneath his thick coat. His ears perked at the sound of approaching boots, but didn't rise. He didn't need to. He watched, tail sweeping the floor once, then again. Kids passed on bikes. An old man tipped his hat. A woman with a therapy dog stopped to snap a picture. Ranger didn't pose. He just existed, a sentinel who'd earned the right to rest. The town called him a hero. To Caleb, he was just family. The bell above the door jingled. Maya Reed walked in, hair pulled back, blazer sharp over her shoulder holster. She looked different, more confident, more focused, but still carried that same grit behind her eyes. She gave Caleb a tired smile. "Place looks good," she said. He poured her a black coffee without asking. "You look like someone who hasn't slept." "I haven't." She took the mug and sipped. "DC's been calling," she said after a pause. "Wants me to head up a federal task force, border trafficking, high-level intel." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Big leagues. Bigger risks, too," she said. "But this time I'll be the one choosing the team." She looked out the window at Ranger. "I've been thinking about that night. The docks. Everything we almost lost. Everything that mattered more than arrests or headlines." Caleb nodded. "That's the part they don't teach you." She pulled a folded paper from her jacket and placed it on the counter. "What's that?" he asked. "A letter," Maya said. "From Captain Grady. He's been cleared to testify." Said you should read it first. Caleb opened it slowly. Handwritten. Honest, the kind of apology that didn't beg for forgiveness, just offered truth. Grady had left Elkridge, turned in his badge, and was working pro bono with a federal watchdog group. He said one dog changed his whole life. Maya said, "Imagine that." Outside, Ranger let out a low huff, not a bark, not a warning, just acknowledgement, as if he knew they were talking about him. "You ever think he knew the whole time?" Caleb asked. Maya smiled. "About Keller, or about us?" "Both." They sat in silence a moment. The cafe filled with quiet chatter. A young couple asked about the story behind the name. An older vet ran his hand gently over the plaque by the door that read, "He didn't bark for food. He barked for what we forgot to see." Maya stood. "You're staying?" "For now," Caleb said. "People need more coffee and less headlines, and Ranger needs someone to remind him he's retired." Maya crouched near the porch on her way out, running her fingers through Ranger's fur. "You did good, buddy," she whispered. Ranger's eyes closed halfway, tail flicking once in answer. As she walked back to her cruiser, the wind carried birdsong instead of sirens. The storm had passed, but what it left behind wasn't ruin. It was a place rebuilt by truth. Inside, Caleb hung the photo Elliot had brought that morning, a drawing of Ranger lying on the porch, eyes open, watching the town. Below it, the caption written in a child's blocky handwriting, "Hope doesn't bark, it waits." And in Elkridge, hope had 4 legs, a scar on its side, and eyes that never stopped watching. Snow fell gently over Elkridge again, not like the storm that started it all, but a soft, deliberate curtain of white. The kind that settled without sound, without violence, just presence. The town had learned to live in the quiet again. Inside the Elkridge Town Hall, the crowd stirred in whispers. Folded programs were passed between gloved hands. The scent of wood polish and old pine filled the room, mingling with the solemn weight of memory. Up front, a podium stood before a long oak wall lined with photos, portraits of soldiers, deputies, K-9 units. Some young, some long gone. Some remembered not by name, but by the silence they left behind. Tonight, the town wasn't here for politics. They were here for legacy. The annual service memorial ceremony always drew a crowd, but this year felt different, more raw, more real, because this year a new portrait was being unveiled. One without medals, without a uniform, but with more courage than most had ever seen. At the back of the hall, Elliot Reynolds stood nervously in a collared shirt and snow-scuffed boots, clutching a sketchpad nearly as tall as his chest. He was older now, maybe only a few months on paper, but in his eyes, years had passed. Caleb knelt beside him. "You ready?" Elliot nodded. "I hope it's good enough." "You didn't draw for applause, kid," Caleb said. "You drew the truth. That's more than most people dare." Elliot looked toward the front row where Maya sat in full dress blues, her badge gleaming under the overhead lights. Beside her, Ranger lay calm, head on his paws, ears flicking at the sounds around him. He wore no vest, no collar, just a red bandana, stitched by hand with the words, "He stayed." Mayor Dalker approached the podium, clearing his throat. "Tonight," he began, "we honor those who didn't just serve, but stood, when it mattered most, when it was hardest, when no one else would." He gestured to the easel under the black cloth. "And sometimes our heroes don't raise their hands, they raise their heads, and they stand beside us with no promise of reward. Just trust." He nodded to Elliot. The boy stepped forward. With both hands he lifted the cloth from the canvas. Gasps rippled across the room. The painting was simple. Clean lines, bold strokes, a snow-covered cabin under twilight. Ranger stood in front, tall and still, his shadow stretching behind him into the falling white. No other figures, just him. Guardian of silence, protector of what no one else could see. And at the bottom, written in charcoal script, "Not all heroes walk on two legs." Caleb felt his throat tighten. Around him the room stood in silence, not out of obligation, but reverence. Maya wiped a tear from her eye and placed a hand gently on Ranger's back. The dog didn't move. He didn't need to. The mayor spoke again. "This painting will hang here permanently, alongside our honored dead and living legends, to remind us that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it's found in quiet pause, in loyalty without question, in sacrifice without command." Applause rose, slow at first, then building, not loud, but full. Elliot stepped back, cheeks flushed. Caleb put a hand on his shoulder. "You did more than draw," he said. "You captured what we forgot to say." Later, as the hall emptied and candles were blown out one by one, the painting remained, framed in soft light, untouched, watched. Outside, snow continued to fall. Ranger sat on the steps, watching the town from his quiet place. Elliot sat beside him, sketchpad on his lap again. Not drawing this time, just being. "What do you think happens after heroes retire?" the boy asked softly. Caleb joined them, easing down with a quiet grunt. "They don't really retire," he said. "They just choose different battles." Ranger lifted his head, looked at the boy, then at Caleb. His tail thumped once, and beneath that same sky, one dog reminded them all that memory is not made in parades or medals, but in the stillness after the storm, when the world watches, and one heart decides to stay. The first signs of spring touched Elkridge with a quiet hand. Ice receded from the rooftops, meltwater trickled in the gutters, and somewhere beyond the hills, the river had begun to move again. Life returned slowly, not with fanfare, but with steady grace. The porch creaked as Caleb Rowan settled into the old wooden chair, a cup of black coffee resting on the arm. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the gravel drive. At his feet, Ranger lay stretched out, head raised just enough to catch the warm air. The scar along the shepherd's side had faded, but never disappeared. It remained, a faint reminder of the night everything could have ended, of the loyalty that refused to die. Inside the cafe, a small group of veterans gathered around the fire, swapping stories that had more silence than words. One of them reached down to scratch behind Ranger's ear as they passed. The dog didn't move, but his tail thumped twice in acknowledgement. Across town, kids drew chalk outlines of Ranger on the sidewalks. Someone had stitched his name into a school patch, and every few days another handwritten letter arrived, from strangers, from families, from old handlers halfway across the country, thanking him, thanking them. The radio crackled gently beside Caleb, tuned to the local public station. A voice came on, familiar, warm. "Tonight," it said, "we honor a dog who didn't just survive, he protected what others tried to bury. He reminded us that sometimes the loudest truth walks quietly, and sometimes the bravest soldier has 4 legs." Caleb reached down, resting a hand on Ranger's head. The shepherd shifted, pressing closer. "Still guarding, huh, boy?" he whispered. The dog didn't look up. He didn't have to. The sun sank a little lower. Wind stirred the pine branches. Somewhere down the road, a pair of boots crunched on gravel, a visitor approaching the cafe. But neither man nor dog moved. Not yet, because peace wasn't silence. It was knowing someone was watching. The screen fades, and text appears in white against the amber light of a fading day. He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. What's your story with a loyal pet? Tell us below. And if this story moved you, Subscribe to German Shepherd for more true tales of courage, healing, and the bond that never breaks. Because loyalty like this deserves to be remembered.